I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening for our follow-up of the Wakefield Forest neighborhood improvements. As promised, this is our follow-up meeting to go over the feedback we received after the first meeting, additional studies that we did, and additional data that we looked at. So thank you for everyone being here tonight. As part of our team, we have Carla Dabrowski, our Assistant City Engineer, helping us tonight. We have Mandy DeSanto, Management Assistant in the Engineering Division, helping as well. And Chad Ritzler, you may have seen him around town, one of our engineering coordinators helping us. And I am Jackie Field, the Service Director and City Engineer. So with that, the format for tonight is pretty much what we did last time. If you weren't here, we started with the presentation where I go over all of the data, and tonight we'll go over the recommendations. And then we will do some question and answers from the chat box with the help of our team, reviewing the chat box as we go. And then at the end, we will take public comment and kind of do a question and answer session. Or if you just want to make comment, that's fine too. So thank you all for being here. Again, be sure, if you haven't already, to email Mandy DeSanto at mdisanto@uaoh.net. That'll keep you on our list to keep receiving updates about our progress with this project. A few housekeeping things. At the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see a chat icon. And to use the chat box this evening, you'll want to click on that. And then once you do that, you'll see it says to, and you can change that to just the panelists. So it would just be myself, Carla, Mandy, and Chad that would see your comments or questions. Or if you want the entire meeting to see, you can change that to all panelists and attendees. So with that, we will get started. Last time we gave an overview of the Kingsdale development project that kind of spurred the movement that we're seeing in the neighborhood right now. So I'm not going to go back through all the details of the development, but I did want to share with you this exhibit that shows the walkability that we're trying to provide in the proposed development. So as a condition of, if it is approved, you can see all of the red areas are the proposed sidewalks or paths, and we are requiring them to do larger paths. Part of this is because whenever you have a centralized parking garage location, we want to provide walkability throughout the development and then to neighboring sites that people would want to visit by foot. And so by providing, 8-foot paths on the exterior and paths to possibly community center. I don't know if any of you were on that meeting last night, but the community center task force presented their recommendations to city council last night. Proposing the community center be at this site, but then increased sidewalks throughout. So all of the red is the sidewalks or path, and then all of the orange shows the existing sidewalks or paths that we have. So just a reminder, we went over the requirements of the traffic impact study at our last meeting, but just as a follow-up and a reminder, we are still reviewing the traffic impact study. We had sent our last comments back and still looking for revised plans. Additionally, we'll be sending Wakefield forest improvements to be included in that final traffic impact study before it's approved. So obviously we have some work to do with all of you as the neighborhood, because we want to get our finalized recommendations in that traffic impact study before it's approved. And then once the traffic impact study is approved and some other things are worked out, they can take the final development back plan back to BZAP for approval. So the recommendations for improvements related directly to the development that are in the traffic impact study today are, again, improvements to the 5 Points intersection, adding an additional right turn lane on Fishinger eastbound, and extending the turn lanes on Tremont Road southbound. Additionally, we'll be adding fiber to interconnect all the traffic signals between Zollinger and 5 Points so that they can talk to each other. That improves efficiency with the signals and makes it so that when you're driving the corridor, you don't stop at every single red light. And then a new signal at Ridgecliff Road is proposed there. And then a new pedestrian crossing median at the north end of the site. Again, we show that traffic calming at Trentwood, and then relocating the current signal on Northwest Boulevard, approximately 65 foot south of its current location, to have a perpendicular driveway into this area now, and then signal timing adjustments to the traffic signal at Northwest and Zollinger. So after the last meeting, I heard and listened to many of you, and I know that you wanted to see additional traffic counts and traffic data on the east side of the neighborhood. So we did complete that. And what I tried to do with this map, and I know there's a lot of information here, and this will be available for you guys to review after the meeting. We'll send you all links to all the information. But on the top of these boxes, you can see that this is the 85th percentile speed of our traffic study. And then the bottom number shows the average vehicles per day in that direction. So the arrow here is showing you westbound on Trentwood. The 85th percentile speed was found to be 33 miles per hour. And what the 85th percentile speed is, that's when you look at that curve, it's where we find the most people traveling that speed. And then similarly, eastbound, you can see that the speed was 34 miles per hour and then 185 vehicles per day. So something I want to point out here is, when you look at the vehicles per day on Fishinger Road, westbound, you're over 7,000, eastbound, you're over 9,000. And looking at Tremont, you're at 6,600 southbound, 5,100 northbound. So for the most part, people are using our arterials the way they should be. We do have the highest level of traffic on those corridors, and those are the corridors that we have the capacity to handle additional traffic. So that's why we are concentrating on what we found in the neighborhood is mostly speeding problems. And so we want to work with you all to solve those or make them better and make improvements to them. And then one thing that did catch our eye was when you look at the eastbound traffic on Trentwood, you can see, people coming off of Northwest. Eastbound, there's about 439 vehicles per day. But you can see here, if you look at the eastbound Trentwood over here, that reduces to 185. So that tells us that people are coming east on Trentwood and either going north to Fishinger most likely, or some south on Mount Holyoke here. So that goes into part of our recommendations that we'll be looking at later. Additionally, I wanted to point out that we did put up the speed radar signs after our last meeting as promised, and we focused on the 2 highest speeding areas that we saw. So the yellow stars show where those speed radar signs are at if you haven't seen them. So one right now is northbound on Mount Holyoke, and the other is westbound on Trentwood here. So when we were looking at alternatives, one thing that I heard that you wanted to see was if we made traffic restrictions on Trentwood at Northwest, what would that do to traffic? How would that impact the rest of the neighborhood? So I actually had a third-party consultant help me on this because I was working on so many other things for this. And so we made some volume assumptions. You can see here, we used our traffic counts for Trentwood to look and see where the traffic was going. And so, if you're going west on Trentwood, we're assuming that 45% of people are then going north and 55% are going south. And then similarly for people turning on to Trentwood. So you can see the average daily traffic counts from our fall 2020 counts are over here that went into our volume assumptions. And then average daily traffic of Zollinger, we had counts from 2017 and we adjusted those based on the growth rate from MORPC to 5,600. So that takes us into the next movement assumptions that we made. So when we're looking at the Northwest Trentwood intersection and we're talking about restrictions, we needed to assume where these vehicles would go if they couldn't go onto Trentwood. So number one here shows that we assume all southbound lefts from northwest. So if you're going south on Northwest and then turning onto Trentwood, would now enter via Mount Holyoke instead. Then all northbound rights from Northwest would now enter the neighborhood using Zollinger Road. And then number three, so if you're westbound on Trentwood and then turning north onto Northwest normally, we assume that those vehicles would now exit using Mount Holyoke. And then for westbound vehicles that would want to travel south on Northwest, if they couldn't make that movement, we're assuming that they would now exit on Zollinger and Kirkley. So then that brings us to to look at the different scenarios. So we looked at three scenarios for Trentwood. We looked at what would happen if we closed Trentwood completely. And that is this slide. So you can see the red shows where volumes would increase of vehicular traffic. And the blue shows where we would see the decrease in volume. And the yellow is showing the movements that are prohibited. So in this scenario, Trentwood is completely closed off. So you can see the existing average daily traffic on Trentwood was 832 vehicles per day. And we assume that now at zero. Obviously, the people that live here would still be a couple, but just for our assumptions for the study, we went to zero. So where do those vehicles go then? So that brings us to an increase for Mount Holyoke of 375 additional vehicles, bringing the average daily traffic to about 1,300 vehicles a day. And then down here, entering the intersection or the neighborhood and exiting from this way, we see an increase of about 460 vehicles per day. Another scenario was what happens if we convert Trentwood into a right only out and a right only in. So right in, right out, no left turns. And you can see that it cuts the Trentwood traffic down about half. So losing 480 vehicles per day in this area. And then you see a milder decrease or increase to Mount Holyoke from the previous slide with the restriction to adding about 200 vehicles per day. And similarly, Zollinger vehicles entering this way, about 270 vehicles per day. So when you spread out those 200 vehicles per day, over the span of the entire day, assuming that most will be in your peaks, it's not as much of an increase as when we looked at the full restriction. And then the third scenario we looked at was converting Trentwood to westbound only from Brandon to northwest. So in this scenario, you can see the yellow is the prohibited movement that is no longer allowed. So we talked about where these vehicles would go. So they would have to either travel on Fishinger if they're coming into the neighborhood and then south on Mount Holyoke, or they would be coming down northwest and entering in through Zollinger and then up into the neighborhood using these streets, our assumptions. So you can see that that is also a decrease from the full restriction, obviously. So we're seeing an additional traffic of 210 vehicles on Mount Holyoke, and then similarly 260 increase from Zollinger, then funneling into the neighborhood. So there's a lot of information on this slide, and I'm going to spend some time on it because I want to go through all of our recommendations. What this slide is you know, I presented some of this data in the last meeting, and we took comments, listened, looked at our traffic data, did additional counts, and I'll show you where I work for the fire department too, and put this into what we feel would be great improvements to the neighborhood to get us started in the right path here. So starting, you know, in the upper left-hand corner here, this is the Northwest Boulevard at Trentwood intersection. And based on the traffic data, looking at the impact that it would have for the different scenarios to Trentwood, we believe our recommendation is to make Trentwood one way so that it's vehicles cannot enter Trentwood from Northwest Boulevard. That was the least impact we saw to the rest of the neighborhood, but with the biggest benefit. As part of our recommendations, we're looking at, you know, this is going to have an impact to the neighborhood. It's going to have an impact to the people that live on Trentwood, and how you come and go from your house. You know, when we're looking at those traffic volumes, we have about 423 houses in the Wakefield Forest neighborhood. And most of our traffic counts were well below 1,000 vehicles per day, some were a little above. And if you think about a house making 1 or 2 trips per house per day, most of the traffic that we're seeing is from the neighborhood. So we realize that any restrictions we do are going to impact you the most. But recognizing that we do see that cut through right now from Trent, off of Northwest Boulevard onto Trentwood, then north onto Fishinger. So this eliminates that cut through movement. And our thought is that we can do a pilot project in working with the neighborhood, and we could implement this in early 2021 and basically see how it goes for everybody for about a year. I want to do additional traffic studies during that time, and I would want to obviously hear from the neighborhood on how this impacts your life. And you know, at first, obviously, it's going to be a big change and it's going to be hard, but as it's in place, how traffic and how your daily commute evolves, and if it becomes normal and it becomes something that you like, or if it's not enough and we want to move forward with a full closure, or if we absolutely hate it and want to go back to no restrictions. So I think a pilot project here is a really good idea to test that. You will see here that I do have a caveat here. So we're still looking at sidewalk on the north side of Trentwood Road. And I do have a caveat that if it is determined after 1 year that further restrictions are wanted by the neighborhood and we close Trentwood, the city would not invest in installing sidewalk then. because we would not have barely any traffic volume on that road, and instead would use, those dollars to make a different improvement. And I know I heard from so many of you about the sidewalk on Trentwood and wanting it on the south side, and I totally understand that, and I totally agree. The problem is the city does not have the right of way on the south side of Trentwood to install a sidewalk. So on the north side of Trentwood, we have about 13 or 14 foot of right of way. Obviously plenty of room to install a 5-foot sidewalk and a beautiful tree lawn. But on the south side, we have about 7 to 8 feet. So we don't have room to install a sidewalk and get the driveway slopes right, and definitely wouldn't have any room for trees then. So that's why I'm still recommending, if we move forward with sidewalk on the north side of Trentwood, which is in my recommendation as long as we don't fully close Trentwood, to have it on the north side because it's the only place I have room for it. So with that, there would be a pedestrian activated push button across Northwest Boulevard that would be activated. The lights would be activated by a push button, similarly to what you see on Tremont Road between Tremont Center and Tremont Elementary and the library right now. So traveling east, we get to the mini roundabout at Trentwood and Mount Holyoke. So that is still in the plan. And then you can see the new addition from everything I heard. Sidewalk on Mount Holyoke was critical. We need to provide a safe place for our kids and our community to walk throughout the neighborhood, and Mount Holyoke sees the most traffic in the neighborhood. And that's where we have the biggest speeding problems right now. So installing a sidewalk on Mount Holyoke absolutely makes sense. That recommendation is to go on the west side of Mount Holyoke. And again, that's looking at city right of way. So we have 11 feet on the west side. So we have room to put the sidewalk in, and then we would have a grass strip between the sidewalk and the road to provide a buffer from the road to the sidewalk. But then on the east side, when you look, we're at about 8 feet. So then we start to get into not having room for proper driveway slopes and having a flat sidewalk. With that, there would need to be a crosswalk across Fishinger to get to the sidewalk on the north side of Fishinger there. So we would be proposing a similar push button activated feature as I spoke about on Northwest at Trentwood. So we'll stay at the top of the map for now. So keep going east here, and that gets us to North Star Road. North Star Road is already in our capital improvements plan for resurfacing in 2022. With that, we will be adding sidewalk on the west side of North Star Road from Fishinger to Zollinger Road. In addition to that, I heard and I see that additional traffic calming is really needed. So I put stars there for potential traffic calming with the 2022 North Star Road resurfacing. And the reason that there's stars is because I want to get additional feedback on what's working and what's not. And when we get into the design of North Star, we can work on what those traffic calming features would be if you're all in favor of that. So moving south here to Kirkley Road, you can see that as a start, I heard that many of you have parking concerns, and the fire hydrants are on the south side of Kirkley here between Brandon and Mount Holyoke. So proposing no parking on the south side of Kirkley. Obviously that's the closest residential street to the high school. So we know that that's probably one of the first places that if we're going to have overflow parking problems, we would see it. So to alleviate some of that congestion, we can propose that no parking on the south side of Kirkley there. And then traffic calming islands on Brandon Road, just north of Zollinger, and another traffic calming island on Mount Holyoke, just north of Zollinger. So again, I know there's a lot of information on this, but this was created with the feedback that I heard and received during our last meeting and after our last meeting, and then again with the additional traffic studies we did, and looking at the volume adjustments too. So I want to go into a little bit of the details on a few of these recommendations. So we looked at a mini roundabout at Mount Holyoke and Trentwood last time, and this is what the proposal looked like last time in our meeting. And I knew it was important that when I'm telling you guys what we can and can't do, I really wanted to show you realistically what we could and couldn't do. So I know that whenever we put in traffic calming, we do still have to think about obviously emergency vehicle access and delivery access. You know, neighbors are going to move, neighbors are going to get deliveries of appliances, and we have to make sure that those vehicles can still access the neighborhood. So we got out our largest piece of equipment, and from what I heard, many of you saw us out there. And we had the ladder truck and the fire department join us out, and we did some setups of the traffic calming in the mini roundabout there. And so you can see we mimicked it with cones and did a mock run. And through that, we found where we needed to make some adjustments so that the ladder truck could still get through to the neighborhood. So with that, this is what our improvements recommendation look like now. So we still have the 15-foot diameter circle in the middle. That would be landscaped. And then we have a 5-foot wide band around that. That would be a drivable surface. So for the average vehicle traveling, you're not going to want to go on a different surface. But for vehicles that need to use it, it would be a drivable surface. So it still gives you that traffic calming effect, definitely slows down vehicles. It eliminates the long straight shot that you see when you're on Mount Holyoke now, and then makes that intersection itself safer as well. This is just taking a closer look at what we could do with the one-way. So when we do the pilot, we obviously wouldn't put in any permanent infrastructure improvements at that time. But if we stayed with the one-way after the pilot, which we will all determine together, this is what that intersection could look like. So we would have a bump out to make the crosswalk shorter, and just to make this that you're exiting the neighborhood and going on the northwest clear. And then this is that crosswalk I spoke about across northwest. So looking at Brandon Road and Zollinger Road, in the previous meeting, I showed you 2 exhibits of what our traffic calming island could look like. There was 2 options we were looking at. And again, we took our ladder truck out and we coned off where the island would be. And obviously, you have a big turning radius with a ladder truck. So we made some adjustments so that we still had the same traffic calming effect, but again, we could have emergency access to the neighborhood, and we're not prohibiting that. So by pushing this traffic calming island back 85 feet, you can see that we're still not into, this is not a driveway, this is a front door sidewalk here. But we're making those lanes 10 foot wide, which the ladder truck can get through. So they'll swing off of Zollinger onto Brandon, and then they can get through the 10 foot wide travel lane there. But what that does is really, going southbound or northbound, it really breaks up your line of sight and then forces vehicles to slow down with the narrow travel lane. Similarly, we heard and we want to be consistent to some degree with what we're doing. That, Mount Holyoke, the mini roundabout was a great idea on the north side, but we need something on the south side too, to help influence driver behavior and slow these vehicles down. So this shows a traffic calming island on Mount Holyoke north of Zollinger Road. And getting into the placement of these, we have to make sure that we're not by driveways here. And so this, again, does not impact anyone's driveway, but gives that same traffic calming effect and breaks up the long straightaway that you see when you're traveling on Mount Holyoke today. So that was a lot of information, and I need a lot of feedback from all of you on this. So we did some polls last time, and I have polls to go through again. So I want to get your feedback on the adjustments we made and new things that you saw tonight, so that we can all take a look at how we're feeling about everything. And I know it's a lot of information, and this is your initial reaction. So these polls are just to kind of give us a sense of if we're all on the same page here, or if there's something that we're way off on and need to completely adjust. So I think I have about 9 polling questions. So our first question, and I think that you can move the chat box around so that you can see the map while you're doing this. But the first question is, do you like the proposed mini roundabout at Mount Holyoke Road? And I tried to make the question simpler this time. I know that I had a lot of wording in my answers last time, and I tried to give you an option of other if yes, no wasn't clear enough. So I'll give everybody some time to read the question, look at the map, gather their thoughts, and then we'll share the results. Okay, so it looks like most people have voted. I'll share these results with everybody. So it looks like for the most part, we are in favor of the mini roundabout at Mount Holyoke. 87%, and I have to say that's really, really good for a neighborhood of your size. And I know there's a lot of different opinions, so I appreciate that. And almost everybody wants at least traffic calming there. So that's really good. That tells me a lot. I appreciate that. So we will go on to question number 2. So are you in favor of the city moving forward with converting Trentwood Road to one-way westbound from Northwest Road to Mirandon Road in early 2021 as a pilot project with additional traffic studies? So this gets the ball rolling early next year. We get this converted, and it gives the neighborhood time to see how your lives adjust, gives us time to study the traffic and the differences it does, and then gives us time to all come back together before we made any permanent infrastructure improvements in that area. And with this, I understand that some of you may be voting no because you want to see Trentwood completely closed. And this does not mean that we would not be completely closing Trentwood. This is just a first step to see where we are in a year from now, to give you guys time to adjust to that and give us time to look at how this impacts the rest of the neighborhood as well. So with that, I will share the results. It looks like we have about 71% in favor of giving this pilot project a try. So that's good. And I realize, like I said, some of you voting no are probably the ones that reached out to me that want to completely close Trentwood. And as a reminder, this doesn't mean that we won't do that in the future. This just gives us a starting point of something that we can implement almost immediately, and gives quick relief to some of the problems that you're seeing, and also gives all of you a chance to see how it affects your lives. So question number 3, let me launch it. So if after the pilot project, the consensus is to not close Trentwood, would you be in favor of sidewalks on the north side of Trentwood Road, understanding the city does not have the right of way to install sidewalks on the south side? Okay, I'm going to share the results. It looks like 90% would be in favor of adding sidewalks to Trentwood Road. Like I said, I heard from many of you and understand the need for them on the south side. I just don't have the property to do that. So it looks like you're still in favor of sidewalks, understanding that, and that you don't want to eliminate them if we choose not to close Trentwood. So we'll go on to question number 4. Do you like proposed sidewalks on the west side of Mount Holyoke Road from Fishinger to Zollinger Road? And again, it's the west side because of the looking at the right of way. That's where we have the most right of way to provide a buffer between the sidewalk and the roadway and not affect the slopes of the driveways. Okay, so it looks like I did something right. I listened, right? I heard from many of you that you wanted to see sidewalks on Mount Holyoke. What I had proposed last time wasn't enough. So I appreciate that 98% of you do like seeing those proposed sidewalks there. Question number 5, let me launch it. So do you like the traffic calming island proposed at Brandon Road, north of Zollinger? And there'll be a question for this for Mount Holyoke too, but this one is for the one at Brandon Road, north of Zollinger. Okay, so sharing results. It looks like 90% of you are in favor of the traffic calming island as proposed, knowing the adjustments that we had to make with emergency access and large vehicle access. So that's good. Looks like we are on the right track there. So, similar question. Do you like the traffic calming island proposed on Mount Holyoke Road north of Zollinger Road? So keeping a consistent approach there, um, but just adding an additional traffic calming device for the south side of Mount Holyoke Road too. Okay, sharing those results, it looks like 88% of you do like that traffic island proposed there. A few of you don't, and just a couple like the idea of traffic calming there, but not that. So I would say overwhelmingly the majority of you do like that idea, so that's good. All right, bear with me. 3 more questions. I appreciate this. It's very helpful. So, would you like the city to look at the possibility of adding a mini roundabout at Kirkley Road and Mount Holyoke Road instead of traffic calming island out Mount Holyoke Road north of Zollinger? So the previous question asked if you like that island. This question asks, instead of that island, would you rather me look at adding a mini roundabout at Kirkley and Mount Holyoke? Okay, looks like most people have voted. That one took a little bit of time. So sharing the results, it looks like we're about 50-50. A few more of you don't want us to look at that, but with that close of results, I think that tells us that in general, because we need to get something in the traffic impact study, because I want to give you all assurance of next steps that we put in there that we will have traffic calming on Mount Holyoke. I would say north of Zollinger to Kirkley. So this gives us time that we can say that we are going to do something there, and then we can all continue to work together on what exactly that would be, because it looks, like I said, 45-55%. We're back and forth there, and I know that that's a new idea that I threw at all of you tonight too. So question number 8, let me launch that. Do you believe the city is on the right track with the North Star Road resurfacing project in 2022 that will add sidewalk to the west side of North Star and potential traffic calming features at Trentwood Road and Kirkley Road? It looks like most people have voted. Let me share the results. So it looks like, yes, for the most part, we feel like we're on the right track. But when we resurface North Star Road, In 2022, adding that sidewalk is very important to you. And then adding the traffic calming at Trentwood and Kirkley Road is important as well. And like I said in the presentation, I think it's important that we leave those as stars, and those will be designed in 2021. We'll reach out with the North Star design project and get input exactly on what those traffic calming features should be there. Okay, last question. How do you feel about restricting parking on the south side of Kirkley Road from Brandon Road to Mount Holyoke Road? And I wasn't trying to be smart. I was just trying to add a little bit of fun to our question. So, hey, it's a good start, but I like it. We're not saying that that's all we want, but it's a good start. No, please don't restrict any of our parking. Or some of you, I don't care because I don't live there. I don't live on that street. It doesn't affect me. I hope you get my humor with that one. Okay. So looking at the results, looks like for the most part, we're a good start on that. We're in favor of doing that for the most part. Some of us don't care because we don't travel that street much, or we don't live on that street, and that's fair. I get that. And a few of us said, no restrictions, keep our parking. But for the most part, it looks like people are okay with that restriction on the south side there. So like I said, these are, our initial, I know these are your initial reactions of getting fed a lot of information in a short amount of time, seeing this for the first time. And I think that it's really important that we see how we're reacting to this together and making sure that we are moving in the right direction together. But, feel free to keep sending us your comments or sending us emails for additional things. My goal is in early January to get a map like this in that traffic impact study before I would approve it, because I know that you, well, I don't know. I hope that some of you trust me, but I also understand that this is bigger than just me. And so it's important to you and me that we have some confirmation of guarantees of things moving forward. So this would be in that traffic impact study as things that have to be done before the development would be completely built. So before it would open, knowing that it takes a few years once everything would be, if it's approved, to be built. So that gives us assurance on the areas of what would go in, and then we can keep working together on the design once we would get to that point of the exact details of exactly how it's going to look in exact locations. But in general, this map would provide us guidance on what was promised to the neighborhood. So I think it's important that for the most part, we are all on board with this and feeling good about it to get it into that to meet the deadlines. So what's next? After shortly here, we're going to go through our questions, and then I'm going to allow time for all of you to speak, ask questions, or just make comments in general. But after this meeting, I'll be reviewing the poll results a little closer and reviewing comments that are either made in the chat box, or if you speak tonight, or received after this meeting. We need to add Wakefield forest improvements into the final traffic impact study for the continental development at Kingsdale. So that traffic impact study must be approved before the submittal of the final development plan goes to BZAP. So there's not a date for that, but I want to make sure that we are all responsive in our efforts of working together, and making sure that I get your needs in there before any deadlines happen. And then based on, looking just initially real quick, and I'll, keep looking at this, but it looks like we're in favor of starting that pilot project in early 2021. So there'll be more information going out about that. Obviously, we'll work with police. When we first initialize that, we'll have message boards out, notifying people of the change in traffic. And police will be giving warnings at first, but we'll have plenty of signage up that alerts people of the change. And then we will work through that pilot together. So just a reminder that all these are public meeting material, a video of this meeting, the presentation, the last meeting is all available on the city website, and I put the link there as well. So with that, I think we can start with questions, Carla. Do you want to give me a few that seemed in general of the chat box?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to start by talking about sidewalks just a little bit more. There were a few questions about whether or not the sidewalk could be placed on the south side, but adjacent to the curb on Trentwood. And then they also wanted to know if there wasn't enough right of way, would there be a way to change it, get a variance, or acquire additional right of way to put it on the south side?
Yep. So, putting sidewalk at the back of curb is not something that we recommend. Moving sidewalk back and providing a buffer between the sidewalk and the road is the reason that we're putting a sidewalk in, and it's really important for safety. We increase pedestrian safety by doing that, and comfort of the pedestrian traveling on that sidewalk by not being right adjacent to the road. But additionally, it also allows a place, for snow removal, for leaves, for trash and recycling cans that are out weekly. Because if it's at back of curb, when you put your trash and recycling out, then you block that sidewalk every time. So, and additionally, when it's at the back of curb, you can't build a flat accessible sidewalk. So at every driveway you have dips and slopes that make it so that if you're pushing a stroller or in a wheelchair or using some other mobility device, it makes it hard to navigate on those dips at every residential home driveway. So when we're, installing new sidewalk for safety, we really like to have that buffer between the road and the sidewalk. There is ways for the city to acquire more right of way. Lane Road was a project that I worked on a few years back. We added sidewalk on the north side of Lane Road, and we did have to get easements from quite a few property owners to put that in. So, we can continue to look at that option, but it's going to be difficult if we have people that don't want to provide easements on the south side, because if we can't have a connected sidewalk, and we have a gap at a property or two, it kind of eliminates the point of putting the sidewalk in. So, like I said, I totally get why we want it on the south side. It's just really not feasible.
So the next sidewalk question has to do with the cost. Will the residents be assessed, or will TIF funds cover the funding for the installation of the sidewalk?
Yeah, so the sidewalk and all the improvements that we are talking about in this map will be funded either by the city or through the project. So residents would not be assessed for any of the improvements, including sidewalk. Good question, though.
All right, if you want to go back to the slide that shows the traffic counts, there were a few questions on the studies pertaining to the east side of Trentwood. They wanted to
Mhm.
know where were the studies?
So the studies were pretty close to where I show the arrows. I'm not exact there, but I'm pretty close to where the arrows are. So we did it in this area in general. We did it just below Stanhope on North Star Road, and then in this area of Kirkley Road. So I tried to put these arrows close to where it was actually done.
And with that, it looks like we already have people starting to raise their hands. So I'll let the residents ask questions or make comments at this point. The first person, and I apologize if I incorrectly pronounce your name, but Carmela Schiavana, you are now unmuted.
Thank you, Carla. So I'm using my daughter's school iPad. So my name is Megan Schiavone.
Okay. Hi, Megan.
So I apologize for the identity. But Jackie, I wanted to say thank you, a big, huge thank you. We have seen the increased police presence. All joking aside, one of my family members was pulled over in my driveway.
Oh no.
for speeding.
No.
So shame on him for speeding, but I mean, that just shows that we really have seen more police in our neighborhood paying attention to the speed, especially on Holyoke. So thank you. And your attention to all of this is beyond, I'm sure you have long days, so we appreciate it. So thank you so much. I love all of the recommendations and suggestions that you've made. I fully support them. I do have a quick question about the westbound one way.
Yes.
So the cut through from 315, I feel like regardless of how many new apartments are built, we're going to see a much increased traffic from 315 to the development. So a one-way westbound, I don't know if that is going to help. So I guess my question is, would we consider maybe a right turn only, because a left turn goes right to the development?
Yeah. So yeah, I understand that, the westbound only takes care of one direction, but it doesn't take care of the other direction of cut through. And that's why we want to do it as a pilot.
Okay.
I don't want to push all the traffic at one time.
No, I get it. I think that's just one
But yeah,
concern. And again, because we don't know yet, because the development's not here.
right.
So
right.
I think it maybe just put it on the radar, because I believe that with all the traffic calming, we will see a difference. Absolutely. And I do feel that the two-way stops are dangerous. So I'm in full support of mini roundabouts or traffic calming at those two-way stops, because that's where there's those close calls when you're driving. So that's all. I didn't want to take up too much time, but I just wanted to say thank you. And I do feel like you have made a lot of really great suggestions, but I'll send a quick email just with those 2 points.
Yeah.
But thank you again.
Yeah. And, our hope too is that, not just a restriction, but with the traffic calming devices, the mini roundabout, narrowing the throat of Trentwood at Northwest.
Right.
Some of that is going to start to deter drivers too.
I agree. I totally agree.
Some hope. So we can keep looking at that and see our results though.
Awesome.
Thank
you so much.
All right, the next speaker will be Ed, just Ed. You are now unmuted. Ed, are you there? You'll have to unmute yourself as well, but I have allowed you to do so.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. It's actually a two-part question. Um, when the school opens, the traffic study, will that take that into consideration on Mount Holyoke as far as the traffic? And then the other part of that question is, if you have a roundabout on Kirkley and Mount Holyoke, and you don't have a traffic calming island just north of Kirkley, north of Zollinger, is there a possibility then that we may have a traffic congestion because people will be parking on that short block between Kirkley and Zollinger on both sides of the block?
Yeah, so good questions. And, whenever we're going to look at, a possibility of a mini roundabout, and similarly at Trentwood and Mount Holyoke, we have to make sure that we have parking restrictions near that mini roundabout so that we have those lanes fully accessible as people begin to navigate around. So if we did run into that being a problem, we could always add a parking restriction on Mount Holyoke between Kirkley and Zollinger to prevent that from happening. And back to your first question, the impacts of Mount Holyoke with the high school. So we did do a full traffic study before the high school construction began, part of that development approval. And when you look at the parking lots for the high school, I understand that the entrance is moving off of Zollinger, but the parking lots are still back off of Mount Holyoke and back off of Brandon Road, similarly to how they were previously. And so, we're still going to have the same use there. So we don't expect the trips to and from to be different than they are today. The thing that we will be watching is how the parking changes. So we're trying to add additional parking at the high school and on Brandon Road with a project next year. But we want to continue to watch too, that if that parking, on-street parking shifts to the north, how we manage that, how we work with you all to make adjustments so that that doesn't ruin your lives. I understand that people need a place to park, but if you can't get in and out of your driveway, that's a problem too. So I hope that's the question.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next speaker will be Dennis Carney. You are now unmuted.
Thank you. Jackie, I've got about 3 questions.
Okay.
You indicated earlier that you didn't think angled parking on Brandon would be possible next to the new high school because there's a 12-inch gas main there and you might not have the right of way to dig up and expand the street. Can you spend that $700,000 on angled parking on Ridgecliff or Mount Holyoke instead?
So we are running into a problem with, it's a 20-inch high pressure gas main on the east side of Brandon Road that is limiting our ability to widen Brandon Road to accommodate the angled parking. But we are currently looking at other options for that. So we are looking at creating kind of like a perpendicular off-site parking that actually allows you to get more parking in because it's just a standard perpendicular parking. And if we did that, we would eliminate the parallel parking on the west side because we can still get the additional parking that we're looking at by just having that all along the east side. So it would be similar to what you see on 12th Avenue by Ohio State campus, where you have a travel lane, then you have a little bit of a buffer, and then you kind of have like a parking area off the side of the road. So that's what we're looking at as a solution around that high pressure gas main. But we still are working with Columbia Gas to see if the angled parking would work. I have a meeting coming up with them next week. So I don't know how it's going to go yet, but I know that we are still going to do parking there one way or another.
Well, if it increases parking, it makes me no difference. It just sounded like your new proposal without the angled parking would actually reduce the number of slots or additional slots that students would have. And that's what I was worried about. Okay, well, thank you. That was a good answer. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
My second question is, will the Ridgecliff extension be a city street?
The Ridgecliff extension.
Into the development?
Sorry, I'm looking back at maps here. Oh, Ridgecliff Road?
Yes.
Okay. So that there's going to be a new traffic signal there. And then that would kind of be like an extension of the street, but that will remain under the maintenance responsibilities of the development. But the city has full access rights.
Okay. All right. Thank you. My last question is, a lot of neighbors have complained for years, and what's being proposed now, I think, will help address those issues that we've had in the past. How can we be sure that the new mitigation will also be effective when the additional volume of traffic is added to the equation? Because there's going to be a lot more traffic.
So, when I look at these volumes, our goal is to install these to deter traffic from coming into the neighborhood. So traffic that's there today, that's not part of the neighborhood traffic, which like I showed in the traffic study, there's not a ton of it, but we do see some. And by doing this, we wanted to deter any future traffic from coming into the neighborhood. So I think I've said this at the previous meeting. I know that these are good first steps, and we need to keep looking at how these perform over time. So once the development is there, we have our traffic calming in place. Our hopes are that these are doing their job by slowing traffic down and deterring any cut through. But we'll have to keep an eye on it and keep looking at it. And see if adjustments need to be made as time changes over the years.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, the last speaker is David Shipley. You are now unmuted.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for having this tonight. One really quick question.
Mm-hmm.
With regard to the roundabouts and the sizes thereof, the mini roundabouts, I think is what you were calling them,
Mm-hmm.
with specific to the diameter, how do those relate in size with the Wilshire Brandon and the Tremont Reading, if you had a guess, just to maybe give some perspective?
Yeah, so these are in between. So the Brandon ones are very, very small. It was just one tree in the center. And the Tremont and Reading is I believe a 25-foot diameter. And so with this, we're looking at a 15-foot diameter center with another 5-foot diameter on the outside of that. So in between, I guess I would say. The difference between this and the Tremont and Reading is that we are looking at making the center a green space for hopeful beautification within the neighborhood. Just to add something green and not just pavement.
Okay, because I travel the Brandon mini roundabout occasionally, and it seems almost to me more dangerous than it really, I don't live in that immediate area, but it almost, it's more concerning to me than actually achieving anything. I don't know if others have that thought or not, but it's good to know that these are going to be a little larger than that. So
Yeah, I personally don't like that either. I feel like it is a bit of a traffic hazard. And so I like the idea of mini roundabouts better, where we are actually using these as a roundabout is proposed to be used and not just kind of a block.
sure. Thank you. Thank you for everything you do.
Oh, thank you.
It looks like we did have somebody else raise their hand.
Okay.
Jeff Bevins? Bevs?
Hi, yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Just a quick question, and I don't want to assume it. When you do the pilot at Trentwood and Northwest Boulevard, I guess to understand the impacts of that, can you put it back to the slide that has the traffic counts on it, please?
Yes. There you go.
There we are. So I'm just looking at the travel westbound on Trentwood, and we have 407 vehicles a day crossing Mount Holyoke Road, and then really only losing about 14 of those as they continue westbound. And we know 400 people don't live west of Mount Holyoke Road on Trentwood. What's the assumption on where those cars are going? I'm assuming they're turning left onto Northwest Boulevard. Is that where you guys landed on that as well?
Correct.
So where are those cars going?
Well, we said 55% were going. So of vehicles traveling westbound on Trentwood, when we look at it, we have over half of them going south. So 55% for our volume assumptions, and then 45% traveling north.
Okay.
From
It's just an
what we looked
oddity
at
to
turning.
think that somebody would drive through the community, drive through the neighborhood, I should say, and then turn right on Northwest to wait at that light. So
Right.
I think more of them are turning left and going, but again, you guys had the counts up and maybe some assumptions as well. So I guess my concern would be if 75% of them are turning left, and I'm just going to take a guess that it's closer to that. Where are those cars going to go? I'm concerned they're going to go left on Brandon, and obviously, since I live on Mount Holyoke Road, I'm concerned they're going to go left on Mount Holyoke Road and then travel down to Zollinger and get out to Northwest Boulevard that way. So we can't live on assumptions. So will we see the traffic counters back up again to see what the impact of the stoppage is, Jackie?
Yeah, so if restricting traffic to westbound only still allows for that movement west on Trentwood all the way to northwest, and then to turn on Northwest.
So I stand corrected. You're not going to limit the turn lane to the right and make that one way. The first step is just to make it one way.
Correct.
Gotcha. That's my bad there. So that count will continue. So that was my misunderstanding there. So thanks for clarifying that. And then I've got to ask the question because I've had my wife asked and one of my neighbors did. I know the sign that's out there right now is having an impact on speed on northbound Mount Holyoke Road. I've seen different variations of those. Have we looked at high speeding areas for permanent placement of signs like that? I'm not saying that one in particular, but are there less expensive permanent signs that remind people that it's 25 and not 40?
Yeah, so you're right on. Those signs are very effective of reminding people that their speed they're actually going. But what we find is that when we keep them permanently, they start to lose their effectiveness. The only one that we have permanent right now in the city is in front of Tremont Elementary. because we had a high, speeding with the school zone. People just kept speeding there and speeding there. So the school wanted us to keep that one there just as a constant reminder, because 20 miles per hour in a school zone is hard for all of us to remember that we need to be doing that. What we like to do with the speed radar signs is put them in place for about 3 months, and then you see us start moving them around. So we might move them a different direction of travel, on the same street or on a neighboring street. And it just kind of, when we move them, it brings awareness again, versus just putting them in permanently. People get used to them over time and they're like, whatever.
Okay. Okay.
So
No,
that's what we're trying to do.
gotcha. Understood. Now, since that's going to be here for 90 days, are you going to flip it to to southbound, or will it stay facing for northbound traffic the entire time? Just
Yeah, I
curious.
think for Trentwood and Mount Holyoke, after the first 3 months, we will flip and do it in a different direction, the opposite direction.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. And then last comment, because you had the map back up again. I'm a bit concerned about the crosswalks. We need it desperately going north to cross Fishinger Road from Wakefield Forest, wherever you would put it. I mean, I see kids on bikes riding to and from the high school. I know they don't live in our neighborhood, so I'm assuming they're coming from the other side of Fishinger Road, north of Fishinger. The crosswalk going across 4 lanes on a 35-mile-an-hour road, have we tested that yet? I know we put one on Northwest Boulevard, and that's pretty new, kind of going around the bend just south of Lane Avenue. Or how is that being? I mean, is it working? I know it can work at Tremont. I mean, it's a turn lane and it's in one north and one southbound lane, but 4 lanes, east and west of 35 to 45-mile-an-hour traffic. That seems kind of like Frogger.
Yeah, so obviously we know that the safest crossing would be a signalized crossing, right?
Yeah.
But then we look at what we can do in cases where we can't provide that. And we have crosswalks on McCoy Road, and other 4-lane intersections. So what we do is we provide advanced signing, we provide high visibility pavement markings, and the push button activated beacon.
Great. So there's one on McCoy. I didn't realize that. Sorry to interrupt, but no, that's where I was going. Do we have them elsewhere? And they've obviously been successful. That's good to hear too.
So we have the crosswalks with the signage and the high visibility pavement markings on McCoy. I don't yet have the rectangular rapid flashing beacon there, but we are looking at projects to add that.
Okay.
As well.
That's great.
So I get it. It's not as safe, but it's better than nothing.
No, and it would be, and again, connecting, the north part of the neighborhood to the high school, and then having the sidewalks leading down to the high school. I think it will really change, the makeup of the neighborhood. It's overdue and much appreciated. So thank you.
Good, thank you.
All right, the next speaker is Natalie Sayaseta. Sorry if I mispronounced your last name.
Oh, don't worry about it. You're fine. So I wanted to first off say thank you so very much. This is so much data and so much information and exactly what we need. That being said, I'm appreciative of the pilot and the one-way going right, and I think that'll give us some good data. I know there's a lot of people that are pushing to close that intersection. But I guess, Jackie, what I want to understand is if you did close that, and maybe we don't go there now, but I think it would help with the pilot for people to understand where, if it was closed, where would all that traffic go? I'm really concerned about Fishinger Road, taking a left-hand turn there. There have been people saying, well, they'll just put a light on Fishinger Road. I know things that aren't that easy to do. So if you can talk about that, or maybe in a later meeting, give us some data as to what would happen, because a lot of us use that right-hand turn to go to that 5-point intersection and make a safe, turn to go west or go elsewhere.
Yeah, so if we close Trentwood completely, we looked at this scenario, and what we see is traffic volumes increasing on Mount Holyoke, and increasing on Zollinger, and then that traffic funnels into the neighborhood on various streets to then get up to Fishinger. And so, a lot of the reason that we want to do the pilot is because it has a less impact to the neighboring streets and still gives us some of the benefit that we're looking through to make Trentwood less desirable for cut through traffic and not able for one direction. But it gives us time to study the impacts of just this one way, and see if our assumptions are correct on where these vehicles will go, and to keep looking at that traffic so that we can make an informed decision together based on the traffic data and the effects it has on your everyday lives towards the end of the pilot project. So hopefully that answers part of your question for now, and more to come as we keep looking at it.
Thank you.
All right, it doesn't look like we have any more hands raised, Jackie.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for all of your time again tonight. I know it's the week before Christmas, but I figured there's not much to do because we're in a pandemic. So I appreciate everybody giving me their Thursday evening and taking the time. It's really important. And I feel like we got a lot of really good feedback tonight. And I know where I'm doing the things that you guys want to see. And I can focus on the areas where we need to keep looking at options. And so what I'm going to do at this point is, give it through the holidays, give you guys time to kind of analyze the data, digest it, and then I'm going to take that map, try to make sure I've addressed everything in it, and send out a final version of that, of what we're thinking, so that everybody can see what we want to put into that traffic impact study to give you that guarantee that this all is going to be happening in the future. So again, I appreciate all your time, and feel free to keep talking to us, keep reaching out if you think of anything, and we will see you all soon, I'm sure. Thank you so much.